Welcome to the eCom Collab Club podcast, where operators, risk takers, and battle-tested founders drop the lessons that cost them time, money, and their sanity, and share what actually works so you don't have to pay the same price. Hosted by Adam Pierce, co-founder of the eCom Collab Club, and Blend Commerce, the Shopify CRO agency.
So, Luke Bream, CEO of Valentte, welcome to the show. And Luke, I'm going to dive straight in here. You are the chief exec of a brand that is obviously running a lot on e-commerce. What is on your mind today at 3:30 p.m. on a rather drab Monday?
I think right now it's all about landing pages, ad traffic, lead generation. It's just a ton of stuff. We come back after Christmas, and it's how do we scale ad spend profitably, and that's challenging. And I've been looking a lot at the best brands in the world, and we're sort of reverse engineering what they're doing, and then trying to translate that into our own business to see what makes a difference. Because scaling ad spend is super difficult, and we aim to be profitable on the first transaction, or at least break even on the first transaction. So that is relatively easy at low spend. It gets more and more difficult as you spend more money. And so we're right in the middle of Andromeda and AI, ad creation, and you've got a lot of levers to pull there. And then you look at offer strategy, pricing, how does that fit into the mix? So yeah, I think it's an incredibly interesting time at the moment.
And I think, like, on the subject of ads, I mean, has this been something that you think that has been, I guess, on your mind for the past 12 months or so? Is it something that you think has changed significantly in the past sort of 3 or 4 months? I think
ads has always been a significant part. Look, our backstory is that we came into ads in 2020. We'd never run ads at that point. COVID. We spent $1,000. We took the bounce back loan, spent £1,000 on ad the first week. At the end of that first year, we'd spent nearly $1 million, and it remains a massively important part. I think last year we spent 3.1 million on Meta and about 600,000 on Google. So it's a hugely important part of our mix. I would imagine this year we'll probably spend 5 to 10 million on ads. So it's a massively important channel. In answer to your specific question, it's changed a lot, and we are really excited about that change. I think we started to become really aware of Andromeda and the change that was offered towards the back end of the year. And I would say really not until about November time did we really start thinking about it. And then I did a lot of work over the next 6 or 7 weeks understanding the implications of that. And I actually think it offers the most colossal opportunity, because you're able to move from a situation where you've got a relatively small number of ad sets with high levels of spend, a lot of associated risk, because roughly 1% of ads you create is going to be a winner. So you've got a lot of risk when one of those ads in the ad set goes off the boil. Whereas what Andromeda offers you the opportunity is to talk to tons of different personas. We're aiming to build out, I think currently we've got about, in our new customer ad set, we've got about 30 separate ad sets, each one targeting a different persona. And we would imagine over the next 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to push that up to 100 to 200 different personas. And I think what's fascinating about that is that it opens the door up for full personalization, which just didn't exist before, because we are passing the persona data and the angle on the query string to the website. So what we're then able to do, and we're just building this functionality at the moment, but it offers full personalization on the landing page and through the customer journey, because we can take that personalization into email, into SMS, and so on. So I think it's a real game changer, because when you think about ad creation, most people, I mean, I had a son of a friend of mine. He's in our office at the moment, runs a small business, and he has created since he's been running ads, not massively long, since before Christmas, 120 different ads. Well, the truth of the matter is, if only 1% of your ads is going to be a winner, he's only probably found one winner in that length of time. We're aiming to get to, using AI, to get towards 1,500 ads a week. So 1,000 statics where we're predominantly testing concepts and things like that, and 500 AI videos. Now, we're not there yet, but that is the direction of travel for us. And I think the two things are coming together. You've got a joining up of AI with an algorithm change that massively rewards creative diversity. And I think there's a colossal opportunity, and we feel, and also de-risk the account as well, because as the ad set spend goes up inside an ad set, you inevitably have drop-offs in performance. Whereas, you take 100 ad sets, spending £200 per ad set, and you've got a £20,000 a day spend. So, actually it's relatively easy to draw up a persona that can manage a £200 a day spend. What gets much more difficult is scaling a persona up to £1,000, £5,000 a day spend, and there's a lot more risk with that. So it feels to us like there's a really, really interesting time, and AI is getting better and better. It still needs a lot of work. AI is not full automation. I think that's the main thing to think about it. But what it is, it still requires both a strategist sitting behind it, looking at actually what you're asking the AI to do, and it still needs someone with a creative eye to provide the guardrails in place to keep the AI on track. But once you get more to grips with that, I think there's just a huge opportunity at the moment. It feels very exciting.
Sure. I mean, look, there's lots I want to unpick there. So the place I want to start at is, look, in terms of obviously using AI for ads, one of the things that sort of has come out of the past few weeks is the fact that people are saying, look, in terms of the creatives that are being produced, there is some inconsistencies. You've had Jaguar Land Rover, kind of posting a 4x4 that looked like a bus. There was some sort of intricacies that are not quite there, which I think we all expect. I guess what I want to ask is that, in terms of with those inconsistencies that are going to happen to get to this point, are you kind of prepared to take that on the chin?
You have to. You absolutely. So we had, I've got a head of brand, I've got a lead designer, we've got a team of graphic designers and so on, but ultimately I've got those two sitting at the top, and we had to have a very frank conversation. I mean, I've got 10 people in my ad team, and 5 creative strategists, and then we've got various people, another 5 kind of supporting those in various different ways. But we had to have a very frank conversation, because the truth of the matter is, when you first start using AI, you do not have either the skill, you don't have the prompt engine in place, you don't have enough of an understanding of what impacts the look and feel of the ads. So you have to essentially start from a very wide sort of tolerance of what we're going to accept. And that really is very difficult. If you've got brand managers in place and things like that, they really find that super difficult. But I had to say, look, the priority here at the moment is experimentation and usage. We've got to get volume up. We've got to understand what it is. And then gradually, we've been producing AI ads on statics at scale for the last month. So we started back on the 5th of January, and then we gradually began that process. And what you've seen is a gradual tightening of the guardrails as we have. Of course, we rejected some stuff. It wasn't literally everything a blanket approach, but we gradually tightened the rails to get closer and closer back towards our original kind of what we would accept as guidelines. And I think you have to have some flexibility surrounding that. Otherwise, you're just never going to get started with it. We're going through a similar process with AI video at the moment, which is incidentally is much more difficult to do at scale. There is more stuff that can go wrong with that. But we're getting there with that as well. But that's shown up less in our account at the moment. So I think you have to accept it's quite, we had problems with logos and things like that, whereby it would dump other people's products in. So other people's shape packaging, other people's shape bottles. So where do you stand on that? what happens when the logo's blurry, and so on. So there's a whole, it is a bit of a minefield, and you have to figure it. But the way we view it internally is, if you think about a hierarchy of expense to us as a brand, at the highest level is changing packaging, right? Because that, you've got massive amounts of stuff in stock. So changing anything that ends up on packaging is the last thing we want to do. And you edge down from that, and you get to things that are very disposable in our business. So email is probably the most disposable, because we send an email and that's it. So you can evolve in that. Ads are pretty disposable as well, because, when you think about the stats, like 88% of your ads are going to spend less than $50 and you're going to waste them. Another 10% are going to spend less than 500. So still not lasting, probably not even lasting a week. And 1 to 2% are going to spend big money. So the vast majority of what you're creating is going to go in the rubbish bin. So you don't need to be overly protective of that. And we take the view that ads is the place to really experiment with our brand. And then we gradually filter that down into the things that are much more expensive to change and we need to get right.
I love that perspective. And I think, look, it's, as you know, look, I'm just from the CRO world, and it's similar to us, is that, we, as from a perspective of what we're doing here, we are trying to test fairly rapidly and not being too precious about all of that output, because like you quite eloquently put there, you don't need to actually worry about the fact that everything is 100% bang on the money. And sort of, like you said, you have that sort of, smooth as possible as you can of expecting things to happen in the way they should do. I suppose the other thing then, sort of leading on from that, is, when it comes to those ads, the bigger picture here is, what are those ads for? And what I mean by that is that we had this age-old conversation about, in e-commerce, you're aiming for e-commerce conversion rate, you're looking for AOV, you're looking for revenue profitability. ROAS, for example, people will talk about, is it ROAS, is it POAS? Whichever kind of term you want to look at. From that point of view for you guys right now, particularly when you are looking at ads and the overall impact on the business, what are the numbers that you are trying to evaluate and tweak here?
So I think what we're doing, first of all, is we believe you have to make money on the first transaction, or you have to be at least at break even on the first transaction. It's become very common in subscription type businesses to say, okay, we're going to get our money back on, after 3 months or something. I'm not of the opinion that is a healthy place to occupy. I just think about the number of companies that have gone bust in the pursuit of lifetime value, I'm somehow going to get my money back at some point in the future. So we aim to break even on transaction number 1 or on day 1, because we do some upselling post checkout on the actual, like immediately after they've paid. So it's kind of aiming to break even on that transaction. So we look at a blended approach to that, whether it's ROAS or CPA, either or, because they both equate slightly differently. And there's a lot of levers to pull that impact that, to do with average order value, unit profitability of the actual whatever you're going to sell in that first transaction. So there's a lot of things to play there. And then inside the ad set, ultimately what we're doing is we are scaling. You can think of us like a bit like a trading business. So we are having ad sets that target the persona. We would, and essentially what we're using the persona there for is, it's not really about selling a read diffuser. It's about telling the algorithm who we want to speak to. So essentially we are calling out an audience type. So we might call out a gardener, for example. So it's relatively easy to call that out. And we've seen a massive drop in CPMs from doing this. We were typically seeing CPMs inside our account at, say, £10. And then we started on this strategy of really calling out the persona. And then we use angles, to actually sell the product inside that thing. But when you're calling out, we might see CPMs drop down to sort of £6 now, average within the account. And where we get very good, so what we consider to be persona fit, then we're seeing CPMs of £3 or £4, which for a conversion rate campaign is very cheap. And I think that we're taking the CPM as a proxy measure for how closely or how well we have called out the persona. So how well the algorithm, I think the way to think about this now is, you're not making adverts anymore for people you're making them for the algorithm. So the algorithm needs to understand exactly who you want to show that to. So then once you're inside the algorithm, once you're inside the ad set, you need to understand that that gives you a bucket of people with which you're communicating with. And you've got various people at different stages of the funnel, top, middle, and bottom of funnel. You've got various people in there who are going to respond to different reasons to purchase your product. So you are going to need creative diversity in there that answers all of those different things. This talking to all different levels of the funnel, all different angles thing that you would use to sell your product. And then we are typically, unless that advert is bottom of funnel, we are not really looking at ROAS, because the problem is that if you only look at ROAS inside the ad set, then you are going to switch off all your top of funnel, middle of funnel ads, because you're only going to look at the bottom of funnel performance in there, because that's the only thing that's going to drive ROAS. But it's a bit like looking at last click attribution coming onto your website, because if you only look at last click attribution, you are going to say, okay, well, it's only ads that are driving performance or only email. You're not realizing that that customer has seen either multiple touch points, or inside the ad set, they've seen multiple different ads. So the way we're essentially looking at the ad set level is we're essentially looking at impressions a lot of the time, because we're taking the view that if the algorithm is showing that ad, giving it impressions, it's doing that for a reason. And so we are really turning ads off only if we require more ads, more space inside the ad set, or we're trying to, once we see that it's not really getting traction, and we still want to waste budget. Because if you've got, let's say you've got 50 ads in an ad set, for example, or even a small amount, but let's say 50, right? And you've got half a dozen of them spending quite a lot of money. You might well have 30 ads in there spending very low sums of money, but that £5 a day or something that small little ad is spending is actually wasting quite a proportion of your budget. So we've started to use those as a clue to turn things off. So essentially, low impressions dictates that we're gonna switch that advert off, because it's obviously, for whatever reason, it's not driving the traffic. And we internally, we take the view, the creative strategists, that 98% of the work that they do is wasted, and they just have to get very comfortable with that, and iterating and moving on. And creative diversity means really serious creative diversity. It's diversity of visuals, messaging, ad types. And I saw an interesting thing over the weekend, and it was talking about ad types, and they had been testing in a dummy ad account to look at what kind of ad type was being shown. And what they realized was that if a particular ad type resonated, then the algorithm was feeding you that same ad type, even though it was by a different brand for a different product. So let's say it was a before and after type ad or something like that. Then if you had shown that you responded to that advert, then that's what you got fed by different brands. And what that made us realize is that within the bucket of an audience, if you've got a pocket of people that respond to a before and after, for example, ad type, and you haven't got that, their algorithm is simply not going to serve your ads to that pocket of the audience. And that was a real light bulb moment for us. So I think what it points towards is that you need real creative diversity. You don't need lots of the same type. So even bottom of funnel, lots of offer driven adverts, you don't need that. You need each one of the different, maybe 20 different types of ads or something like that. You're going to need an element of each one of those. Is our thinking on it at the moment, but this is evolving. I mean, one of the difficulties at the moment is this is really cutting edge. Like everyone is experimenting here and exploring in the way to tackle this. But I actually think in the end, there's a lot more transparency now than there has been in the past. It's a sense, I think there's a bigger opportunity to have better performance across the board. But what it does require is colossal creative diversity. Now, if you think in my ad team, I've got 10 people and I've got a budget to spend. What are we spending? We're We're spending 10,000 quid a month on top of that on actual UGC, and we're spending about 5,000 a month on AI. So we've got a big budget to do that. So although I think it's easier, it does require, you've got to figure out how, even if you're a small team, how are you going to create creative volume? And I think the skill set is acquiring is to be able to figure out in AI, and I would start with statics, because it's an awful lot easier to figure out static AI than it is to do it with video.
I mean, on this point, I mean, look, we had your eCom Collab Club obviously to talk about acquisition, and we talked about acquisition versus retention. And what I was going to ask you is that it sounds up to me as though what you're saying is that, look, if you're working on that principle that, look, LTV is a thing that you might get to some in the future and actually use profitable first sale, does that then mean that your appetite for any e-commerce tech and any opportunities is always weighted towards acquisition rather than retention? So, for example, like if I said to you, Luke, let's talk about loyalty programs, are you immediately like, no, there's no point, because
I think you need both. You've got to have both, because we're actually not aiming. I don't think it's possible in most instances, unless you've got an exceptionally high AOV. So the likes of Ridge, where they've got an AOV, say, of over £100. Well, of course, you can be profitable on the first transaction there. We've got AOVs of 40. So, it's tough. We need to break even. We're going to need CPAs of like less than £20, £17.50 to £20. So that's tough to do at scale. So I think the best we can hope for is to break even on the first transaction. So of course loyalty is still important, because we only make any money from those subsequent transactions. So we're ultimately aiming to spend as much money as we possibly can at break even on new customer transactions, and as little money as we possibly can on returning customers. So we want those to come in for free as a consequence of email, of loyalty programs, of, et cetera, et cetera. And you need both of them. You can't have one without the other, I don't think. All the best businesses have got some kind of long-term funnel behind them, and it's getting worse because acquisition costs are getting more and more expensive, and they're also getting more and more specialist as well. I mean, I don't think you can have any realistic chance of building a modern direct-to-consumer brand without the founders of that business understanding lead generation. They've got to be either experts at paid traffic or short form content. You have got to understand how to drive traffic to build a direct to consumer business now. It's just a prerequisite, and it's so much more difficult than it was. Although we've been in business 15 years and I knew a lot about online, we actually only really started advertising in 2020, and it's got disproportionately harder in the 5 years that I've been doing it. And it really is, I think, now a winner takes all scenario. The best companies in the world are scaling explosively. There are guys, you look at the results from IM8 of the growth they've had, 0 to nearly 100 million in sales in the first year. And that's built off that didn't come out of luck. I mean, you watch the interviews of the founder of that, and he's got 20 years worth of experience of building brands. So it's like the old adage, right? That the best time to start doing anything was 10 years ago, and the second best time to do is to start now. So you have to get started. You have to be brave. Is it easy? No, it's not. But there is a ton of information out there, and I think you have to immerse yourself in it and figure out, keep records. We use Notion obsessively. I've got this enormous wiki out there. I touched on it, or your event where I share, I'm adding to that. I'm probably spending 6 or 8 hours of my time per day analyzing information, watching stuff, reading stuff, and then adding whatever's I think is valuable from that into Notion. And then that gets shared with my team. We call it like the newspaper, and it comes out 2-3 times a week, and it might have 10, 20, 30 articles in it. And I'm like, this is what you need to read. And it will range from everything from conversion rate optimization to lead generation to ads to, mindset for people and HR and so on. It's right the way across the board. My team also add to it. But I think what you've got then is you're building your own knowledge base, and the AI engine inside Notion is fantastic. So you can say, tell me about a video sales letter, and up it pulls up from all the stuff that you've pre-selected as being important. And we've been doing that about 3 months. There must be quite a few thousand articles in there, and it's got colossal value. And I would really recommend that to people.
Because I think that you mentioned, look, it's 2026. We can't do a podcast talking about AI. We've already spoke about it already. And I think, look, one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, you've mentioned, obviously, look, a couple of things now is that, one, from the ads perspective, you guys are using it in that point of view. Look, Notion, again, is obviously using that to make sure that you have everything in one place and have that knowledge bank and resource. From the point of view then of, I guess, of using AI, where would you say it's genuinely saved you time and money? And where are the places where you're like, look, we've been down a route and it's not quite there for that thing yet?
I think the biggest thing that has saved us, the most valuable thing is probably the least obvious, and that's the ability to consume information quicker. So I never watch YouTube videos anymore. I watch the first 2 or 3 minutes, and I think, okay, this looks interesting, and then I am I've got this huge prompt in ChatGPT that brings me out a playbook from that video, and then I'm consuming that. So it's turning an hour-long video into 5 minutes worth of content for me to read. So I think that is colossally valuable in terms of getting faster to knowledge. I think we've employed I got an AI specialist inside the business, which has brought huge value, just faster. I think that's a really great hire. It's probably not for small businesses because it's a reasonably expensive hire, but that has brought a really specialist set of skills in, and he's just solving problems really quick. It's just like, oh, we're trying to do this, and immediately he's built us something to do that. So that's
that's a specific resource that kind of ultimately you're ideating and you kind of saying, look, let's work on this thing. He's going to say, look, yeah, I'll take the reins from here. I'll build you something. I'll do something for you.
Yeah, exactly that. And he's worked on customer service projects for us. Now he's just working exclusively on ads, automating systems for pushing the ads that we're building into for naming ads and pushing them straight into, because the naming conventions on ads gets progressively more complicated because we use Motion to analyze our ads. That needs a lot of information on the ad name and so on. So that gets more complicated. So we've automated all of that process to push the ads straight into the ad account and to name them in the way that we want, and captions and so on. So he's built us out a script engine that takes our personas, it analyzes, it looks at all our reviews, it looks at competitor ads and designs scripts, automates script creation for us. So I think AI is both a huge advantage, but it's also problematic as well. And I think you have to be mindful. You need to use different AI for different things. It's not the answer to everything, definitely. And I still think that if you're a small team, I think I love Alex Hormozy has this really cool concept of what is your identifying your biggest constraint. And the way to think about this is that you have got, if you imagine you're a weightlifter, right, and you're lifting the bar up, there's two things that influence what you can lift. Like one might be your back strength and the other one's your grip strength. Well, if your grip strength's only 100 kilos, right? Well, if you train your back and you can lift 300 kilos, it doesn't make any difference to performance because you still drop the bar at 100 kilos. So that's what he describes as being the constraint. So in your own business, there is always your number one constraint. That is the constraint that is holding you back at that moment. Any work that you spend, any time you spend doing something that is not focused on the number one constraint, all it's doing is actually allowing future potential, but it doesn't translate into immediate performance or growth now because you haven't fixed the constraint. So his argument is, as a leader in the business, and actually when in the business, you should be getting everyone to focus exclusively on the number one constraint. Once you fix that, well, then you identify what the next number one constraint is, and so on. It's a constantly moving circle, but I think that helps you make sure to prioritize, to figure out what you really need to be working on in order to move the dial.
No, I agree. And I think, you especially need that mentality at the moment, because there is so much being thrown at us in terms of AI tool for this and AI tool for that. And you get shiny object syndrome and you dive into stuff. And I think that's why sometimes, in a way, it's actually counterintuitive to a lot of folks, because ultimately there is so much being thrown at people. They then actually go, look at AI just isn't for me.
Yeah.
And miss out on something that actually could help you, like say, with that kind of constraint.
But I almost think that's a fair enough observation, actually. And I think you have to really look at your own business and say, okay, what are the levers here? What drives the business forward? So in e-commerce, right, it is all, really, it's about new customers coming in at the top and retaining a lifetime value. How do we hold on or get them to spend more money over a period of time? And you have to be pretty ruthless and pretty disciplined to stay on track with that and keep working at it and understand that it's a constantly moving playing field, and you go round and round the loop. And whether that be looking at conversion rates on the website, the structure of the offer, profitability of the offer, ads, email, and there are all these levers. And the weird thing is, all of them can at times be the most important thing. And that the art is to be looking at your business or looking at that pipeline and figuring out, okay, what is the thing at the moment that I feel that we can work on that's going to make the biggest difference here? And then you need to put all your resources and all your energy behind that. I don't think this world anymore rewards generalists, people who are and businesses that are generalists. You need to specialize and become really bloody good at something. And that, I think, is the pathway to success, whether you are an employee or an owner / founder of a business. The more specialist you are, ultimately, the more high value I think that you have, the more value you add to whatever it is that you're doing. So become really good at something.
You give me a very nice segue into our next line of questioning here, Luke, and that is agencies versus in-house. Now, look, be gentle with me. As you know, I'm an agency, but I think, look, I know you talked here today, obviously, about the fact that you have in-house teams. The overall question I have for you, start is, look, agencies are in-house. Look, I can guess from what it says so far, look, it's definitely folks in-house. Why now that working that way, and has it changed over time?
So it certainly has changed, and we continue to use a blended approach. I have concerns if I consider something to be a core competence, i.e., that is absolutely business critical to the success of the business, then ultimately I want that to be in-house. But sometimes it's not always possible to do that. Maybe the learning curve is colossal. So I think there are hybrid models. So sometimes we will work with an agency and actually let the agency do that, because right now it doesn't represent the best use of our time to figure out that in-house and do it. We do a lot of working relationships with take conversion rate optimization. So for a long time we used an agency for that. We had to work with them slightly differently, and we actually teamed them up with our developers. So they did a lot of the concepts and so on, and then our own developers did all the implementation of that, because it meant we could get more testing going on. Model that we're exploring a lot at the moment is more of a consultancy type model, whereby we will have the agency we'll commit to 2 hours a week of time. They will do an hour and a half's worth of analysis on whatever it is that we're working with them on, and then they will do a half an hour presentation a week on that, and we will continue to my team, and we will continue that indefinitely until such time as we feel like we stop learning. I think agencies have a part to play in terms of they've got wider experience and wider access to the market trends that you just don't have as a standalone business. I think they definitely have a part to play at different stages of scale. Where I think they can be difficult is they are never going to operate that with the same passion or dedication or focus as an internal team. Because with the best will in the world, an agency is spreading their time. You have a certain amount of time. So there is a trade-off between the amount that you're going to pay and allocate to them to do that work. And I think you reach a point whereby sometimes it's cheaper to bring that in-house. So I've got very mixed views about it. I have more concerns about ad agencies than I do about agencies in your kind of space, where I think there's much more value in it. I think a lot of agencies running ads, I think it's such a core competence, or needs to be, for a brand. I wouldn't be outsourcing that. And we have done periodically, and it's always ended in tears. And I must have been through a pattern a few times whereby, each time you hear the same pitch. Yeah, we're going to fix you. We're going to be the answer to your prayers. And inevitably it isn't. It doesn't massively improve things. And then you lick your wounds, you break that relationship, you do carry on again, and then you repeat the process at a bigger agency and bigger agency. And so I've got mixed views on it. I think they can add tremendous value. And we always use an agency in some capacity when we start doing something new, because I don't want to waste the time so much learning. So it's much quicker to learn with an agency looking over your shoulder. We've got better at managing. When we first started doing that, we would just get the agency to do the work. Now we're much more about, okay, well, look, we want to do the work, but we want your guidance in it. And that's not terribly popular with agencies, but that's certainly been our approach to it.
It's good to hear now, because I think, look, people. That's the reason I asked the question, because I wanted to kind of understand what your thoughts on it, sort of realistically. But what I was going to say is that in terms, obviously now, with particularly let's focus on ads and the way that AI is being used, do you think there's going to be greater transparency in terms of what ads do? And do you also think there's going to be greater standardization of what ad agencies do, so that the point of difference between the will change as well?
I think so. I've had some very interesting conversations with ad agencies over the last week, funnily enough, people I met at your event, not because they particularly wanted to or thought they were going to get business from us. I just think they wanted to pick on my brains on how we were approaching ads. And I think there's a very big opportunity for agencies at the moment to deal with small to medium-sized direct-to-consumer brands to deliver. They need to change their pricing model, but essentially to deliver creative volume on steroids for them, so that the brands themselves don't have to go in. They can, the agencies can negotiate bulk rates with the tools, so the content, the ad creation is cheaper, because obviously we get access to that because we're making so much of it. And there's a big learning curve to go on there. So we have agency accounts mostly set up with the tools, and I think that bringing creative volume to smaller brands, so they don't need to figure this out, educating them on what Andromeda looks like in terms of creative diversity, in terms of personas and angles, and how you're going to approach that. I think there's an ever bigger place for agencies, actually, and it sort of forms sitting in the middle between the tools and the brand, and actually giving them massive creative volume. But the brands at the moment aren't set up to do this, because if you think about it, what the brands butt up against is brand guidelines and needing perfection and low risk and so on. So it needs a mindset change from both the agencies, in terms of, it's no longer we're going to give you 50 ads per month, or 30 ads per month. We're going to give you 50 ads a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And then we're going to, the brand needs to be accepting of the fact that you're not going to literally sign off every single thing. Not every single one of those is going to be perfect, and so on. So there's a mindset change that needs to go on both sides of that, I think. But I think there are going to be some agencies that nail that concept and it'll be a different pricing model. But I think what will come from that is something very exciting. I mean, we're experimenting something with creative strategists at the moment, whereby, so we've got 5 internal creative strategists, and we're doing a project with someone else at the moment where basically we've said they can take anything above our break-even ROAS. So they can use our ad budget, so they can turn ad sets on. We've given them initial budget of £800 a day, so we turn ad sets on with a £200 a day budget, so they can have 4 ad sets to play with. And they can keep the entire profit above the break-even ROAS. So it's interesting. I think there's different ways of approaching that. It feels we're starting to think of the creative strategist role a bit like a traditional salesperson within the business. There's so much value for us in having more of them and more thinking in terms. We want to see how we can expand the number of creative strategists beyond the immediate team I've got in the building here.
Yeah, it's interesting because it feels to me as well like you're sort of taking more of an entrepreneurial approach with it rather than kind of a direct role point of view. And I think this is what a lot of people have commented about AI, is that the roles that are there within e-commerce brands will actually change somewhat because the capacity of what people need to do is different. But ultimately there still will be roles that are there, but what you'll be doing and the definition of those roles will change.
I think that's absolutely true in create. When you look at AI's effect on creativity, and design, in no way is it reducing the number of creative jobs. It's just changing them. They're just using different tools. I've got a photographer who works for us full time, who has been an old school photographer. He started doing catalogs. He shot catalogs for all of the high street and so on. And he's seen the industry change a lot. Now we use a tool called Omi, which is it's a French tool that we actually physically send the product into them. It's used by all the luxury, LVMH and so on. All the luxury French brands use it. You send the product in, they do these full renders of the product, and then it sits in there. And instead of going into Photoshop, you go into Omi, and you can use it to construct images and video. I mean, for example, if anyone goes onto our homepage, the actual banner across there at the top, I think it's a Valentine's Day one, that's using Omi. So that we could just as easily have shot that using in camera, using a camera, but it's much faster to create using that. So, but it's much better having a photographer use that because he understands lighting, he understands all the angles and so on. So it's just changing the role of the creative, but it's not doing away with the jobs. Most definitely not.
Excellent. And Luke, I suppose we're kind of coming to the end of our time together, and I feel like we've only just kind of get started. But I think what I wanted to ask is that for any of those e-commerce, founders, e-commerce directors, e-commerce managers who are listening now, could you maybe give us, because look, you do a lot of research, like you said there, and you read and you get involved with looking at tools. Give us the top 2 things that you would say once they've finished listening to this podcast, they should go and have a look at, go and research, go and read, websites to go to, that sort of thing.
That's a good question. I think YouTube is probably the most valuable place for information. I think that is where the best knowledge is being written about at the moment. If you want to look at ads, I would go and take a really close look at Motion's YouTube channel. Their creative strategist videos are insanely valuable. I think beyond that, essentially, I think you've got to accept that you need to become a student, a researcher, and you have to accept that a large part of your time needs to be spent on researching and figuring out what is going on, and then model best practice. So I think the most valuable videos you can watch are on high level operators unpicking what they're doing. So there are things like what's it called? Oh God, all the operator stuff. Their stuff's really good. Yeah, really, really good. Is it Open Residency? Oh God, what's he called? Yeah, is that what it's called? I think.
We'll put the link around the show.
Yeah, we'll find them afterwards. And I think, but essentially, what I think the most value comes from finding entrepreneurs, business leaders talking about the nuts and bolts of what they do. there are lots of content on YouTube at the moment, in podcasts, where founders literally unpick exactly the strategies that they are using to do it. I mean, in this video, I've talked a lot about the strategy we've done for ads. If you go back, take the transcript, break that down, you're going to be able to pretty much unpick our ad strategy. And that's what you're finding. So I would get off Instagram, I would get off ChatGPT, I would get off Google search, and I would go into YouTube search and start training the algorithm inside YouTube to show you founder-based content, hour-long podcasts, where they literally break down what it is. You'll look at the videos that say something along the lines of, 25 million a year in sales. This is how we did it. It's like they're basically founders explaining their business models. And that's where you'll find the nuggets of what's really making the difference. And I don't think you need to pay for it all. I wouldn't necessarily, although I pay for advice as well. I think you can get 9/10 of the way there by unpicking other people when they explain their business model, and then spend the time. Don't just watch the video, but design a prompt that takes that information, distills it down into a playbook, and then study the playbook and think, okay, I need to do this, this, and this. And then I suppose the other thing that I do, which is unusual, it probably looks a bit mad to most people. I mean, I've got 13, you can see one behind me over my head, but I have 13 whiteboards around my office. And I am constantly rubbing things out, drawing new things up there, talking to the team about it, and exploring ideas. And I think you should do that. Big difference.
Fantastic. Luke, as I said to you before, it was absolutely fantastic to have you on stage at eCom Cloud Club. Brilliant, obviously, to have you on the podcast as well. And thank you so much for just sharing it and being so open. And I think, it's going to be massively valued to people listening. Obviously, if people want to find out more about you and connect, what should they do? Where should they go?
Is that yours or mine?
It's mine, which is not great.
I'm glad it wasn't mine.
So how should they connect, Luke?
Sorry, say that again. How to connect?
Yeah.
LinkedIn's the easiest way. I'm on Instagram, but it's not the easiest channel for me. But LinkedIn, I'll always accept your people reaching out to me, and I'm happy to explore ideas with people, share knowledge, and so on. It's very open-minded. But when you reach out, just say what you're trying to achieve. I don't mean that in a negative way, but we're all busy people. So if you're interested in selling me something, just be transparent about it. I'll always give you 2 minutes to look at what it is you're doing. If you want advice, then just say that as well, and I'll always give that to you too.
Excellent. Superb. Well, thank you so much. And guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you've liked what you listened to today, do give Luke a follow and stay in touch as well with the eCom Cloud Club podcast. We'll be here again same time next week, the next eCom Cloud Club podcast. Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the eCom Collab Club podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, and join our community at ecomcollabclub.com/community.